final show of May here in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm your host, Greg McElroy. Cole is out today. I believe he's traveling to. I'm not sure where he's traveling, but I'm assuming he's traveling somewhere. Either way, we have Damian Mitchell and John Sabay here alongside. We have a lot of stuff that we need to talk to. The last time Cole was out, we basically said, I would imagine, download record on podcast downloads for crazy youth baseball parents. Even some that weren't so crazy listened in. But I don't plan on canceling any bats today. That's not at least the original intent. It wasn't my original intent that day. It was more to have an ethical conversation. But it took off and gained traction and had some wildfire. And next thing you know, you fast forward and the entire GBBA baseball world has changed. The amount of time people spend talking about GBBA is also a remarkable trend. But we won't get to that. GBBA is great. It's awesome that people are having an opportunity to continue to play. And we support that. Getting outside and playing is always something that we support. But we're not going to be canceling bats today. We're not going to be disparaging crazy youth baseball parents. We're going to be talking about the challenges of fandom. And I'm watching last night, and this is not going to be something about, the Dallas Stars. Okay, that's who it pertains to. But I've gone through this a number of times, whether it be Alabama, the Dallas Stars, the Dallas Mavericks, the Los Angeles Dodgers. Those are my three professional sports teams. In the NFL, I really don't care. I am kind of a Jets fan, but I really genuinely don't care. Just once you've kind of see how the sausage is made, it's hard to really get on board. But if I'm looking at kind of other areas of fandom, I love Tiger Woods. He's my favorite. I used to really like. I wasn't like losing my mind when Roger Federer lost. I didn't care, but he was probably my favorite in tennis. And it's kind of funny to me how fandom in my life has created far more disappointment than it has excitement. But it's worth every disappointment for that excitement. Has anyone else ever aligned with this? Has anyone else ever kind of experienced saying, like, why do we put ourselves out there? It's the greatest. The Dallas Stars, by the way, in case you had missed it last night, and I'm sure several of you have. I'm not sure that Birmingham is a booming hockey metropolis, but you might have had a slight interest in it. The Dallas Stars have now lost seven of the last 8 to the Edmonton Oilers en route to losing 2 straight Western Conference Finals to the Edmonton Oilers. And I don't think, frankly, the Edmonton Oilers have the best player in the world and maybe the third best player in the world on the same team. But other than that, their roster is fine. It's good. It's not like they're an all-star team by any stretch of the imagination. They're not the Dodgers, by the way, who just so happen to be one of my teams and also a gigantic all-star team. But I'm sitting there watching this, and we are down, 3-0 within the first 10 minutes of the game. I mean, it's just like agony once again. And here we are, sitting there. My son and I, Vince, has gotten really into hockey, so we watch the Stars when they play, and that's our team, and we're all in. We're sitting there, and first goal gets let up, soft goal, wide open, right in front of the net, goes over the goalie's shoulder. Second goal, 5-hole, right in the middle. Terrible, terrible goal to give up, but also tough spot for the goalie to be in. Pete DeBoer, yes, his last name is DeBoer. So I have 2 of my teams are coached by guys named Coach DeBoer. But anyways, DeBoer pulls the goalie. And then we're sitting there like, all right, well, I don't even know who the backup is, and I'm pretty dialed into our team, but I haven't seen anyone not named Ottinger in net for a long time. Well, in comes this guy named DeSmith, and he gives up another goal. We're down 3-0 before we even finish our dinner. So I'm sitting there saying, all right, buddy, it's been a great season. He's disappointed. I'm disappointed. But at what point, after losing 3 straight Western Conference Finals, does disappointment become just kind of the norm? Like, why do our expectations change? Like, why does fandom drive us to lunacy? And don't get me wrong, I'm all in. I love sports. I'm raising my kids as diehard sports fans. But the elation of victory when I was 10 years old and the Stars won the Stanley Cup has been followed by about 74 other instances of complete and utter despair. Like the highs that we get, few and far between, outside of the bandwagon Patriot fans and, those that have won a championship every year. Like I am a diehard Dodger fan. And losing to the Padres and the Diamondbacks and the Giants, and losing to all those teams for a very, very long time. I don't count the COVID championship. It didn't count to me. It didn't feel real. It was a shortened season. I'm glad they won it, but I didn't really feel that great, if I'm going to be honest. I mean, there was no one in the crowd. It felt weird. I don't even remember what our record was. I don't even remember what our roster looked like in some cases because a couple guys opted out and so on and so forth. So I don't even really count that year. But I'd never in my entire life, so if you remove the COVID year, never in my entire life had I seen the Dodgers win a World Series. Not one until last year. And last year I soaked it up. I think I stayed up till 1 in the morning. Like not a sip of alcohol in my system. Nothing but just pure and utter childlike joy. It could not have been happier just consuming that. I wanted to go outside and have a cigar, but I believe at the time it was maybe a little bit rainy in the fall. I don't recall. But it's like that's the opposite of the spectrum. I wait my whole life for that one moment. And it's like that was the best. It was so worth it. And now I'm on the other side of the coin. It's like I won a championship in hockey since when I was 10. And we haven't done anything of significance in 25 years. And then don't even get me started with the Dallas Mavericks. Like, okay, yes. When we beat the Miami Heat in 2011, it was probably at that time, removing the championship that I was involved with at Alabama. That was probably my number one championship. Because of who the Miami Heat were at that time. The world's first super team. They were unbeatable. LeBron James is sitting there at their press conference opening it up by saying, hey, I'm not going to win 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7. And it's like the most obnoxious. I'm taking my talents to South Beach. Like everybody hated the Miami Heat. So for at least one season, the Dallas Stars, or the Dallas Mavericks, became the America's team. And it was glorious. To not just win a championship, but to beat the Heat along the way. To see Jason Kidd and Dirk Nowitzki and Jason Terry and a bunch of other guys on that roster go on to win the championship. It was amazing. I will remember exactly where I was when that happened. I was sitting in New Jersey getting ready to go through some preseason orientation stuff for New York Jets training camp. Like we were having like some quarterbacks and wide receivers camp that Sanchez was organizing. And I was sitting in a hotel in Hoboken, New Jersey. So I remember exactly where I was. As sober as the day is long, as happy as a clam, man. Couldn't have been happier. But I asked the question, kind of back to the original point. Like those fleeting moments of elation and excitement and success. You know how many people come up to me and we talk briefly, or sometimes briefly, sometimes not so briefly. We talk about what it was like, and I want to hear their experience going to the Rose Bowl in 2010, the 2009 season, but January of 2010. And I mean, we found out we were going, and we had to sell a couple things, but we went. We were there. I took my daughter. It was the best. Or, oh, man, we found out we were sitting in the Texas side, and it was so uncomfortable, and they were trying to fight, and it was just like, I was like, all right. I mean, I've heard 1,000 stories, maybe 2,000 stories since that moment. You know what people don't talk often about is the 2018 Santa Clara Championship, because it's just absolute heartbreak. But as a sports fan, and I know, look, it may be a little different if you're just a diehard college sports fan, because let's be real. in college athletics, the winning percentages are going to be naturally a little bit higher than that of what you're going to experience as a professional sports fan. Now, I am a Alabama basketball fan and didn't miss a game for nearly 4 years. And every home game that was played in Coleman Coliseum, we were there. Unless there was some type of conflict with one of our football games or practices. So when we were capable of going, we went. But all we ever experienced was agony. I went from the time I became an Alabama fan in December of 2005 until 2018 or whatever it was. I think we won one tournament game. And I believe that was against Creighton in about 2011. Like, agony to me is so ingrained in being a sports fan, it's amazing. And we volunteer for this. And I know, look, it takes me 24 hours to get over. So you caught me on a good emotional day. It takes me 24 hours to get over my team's exit in the postseason. Every year it does, whether it's the Dodgers, the Stars, or the Mavericks. The second we lose in the postseason, and I need a 24-hour rule. And then I'm back. And to be honest with you, with Alabama, it's occasionally like a 36-hour rule. Like when they lose to Michigan, I need like 36 hours until I am not in a bad mood. Just being honest. You guys might be longer. You might be shorter. But it usually takes me about 36 hours to get over an Alabama defeat. Unless it's basketball and we make it to the Elite Eight, and I'm like, that's still a good year. I try to have perspective because of where I came from as a college basketball fan. Like, if we make it to the Elite Eight, I'm elated. And I'm disappointed, but that disappointment probably lasts for like 12 hours. Because I just am so proud of what they did to get to that point. But I digress for a moment. Like, I want you to interact. I want you to call in. I want to have this conversation with you. Why do we do it? Like, we volunteer our fandom. We volunteer our time. We volunteer our energy. We volunteer our happiness. We volunteer our emotions. We invest money. Vince has a Tyler Seguin jersey. Like, why on God's green? I have a jersey. I don't own more than like 3 jerseys that I didn't play in. And one of them is a Dallas Stars jersey. The other is a Larry Bird jersey that I bought at an auction. And the other's a Tom Brady jersey. Those are literally the 3 jerseys I own. One is a Dallas Stars jersey. I wasn't wearing it last night. No, I wasn't. That's probably why we lost. Probably why we lost. If I'm going to be honest. But why do we do it? All right, that's what I want to hear from today. And you can tell me your story. Because, look, the reason why I love the Dallas Stars is because for a brief moment in June of 1999, it was the happiest I've ever seen my dad. Ever. Dad took a job with the Dallas Stars. They were building the new American Airlines Center where they still play. Dad was in charge of sales and marketing and sponsorships of that building. And when we were on a vacation cruise, because Dad had no idea that they were going to be in the Stanley Cup Finals. They were playing the Buffalo Sabres. They went to triple overtime. It's probably the latest I'd ever stayed up in my entire life. But I was able to watch that game with my dad. They won the Stanley Cup, and it was the first championship that my dad had ever been a part of in his entire life. Like, I'm talking dating all the way back to Pee Wee football, Little League baseball, high school swim team, high school football, playing at University of Hawaii. The only championship my dad has ever experienced as being a part of that team was the Dallas Stars in 1999 when Brett Hull scored what was a controversial goal in the crease of Dominik Hasek. So, like, that's why I do it, because I loved that moment so much. It was such an impressionable moment in my childhood that I will forever be a diehard Dallas Stars fan as a result. No matter what. No matter what. Why do I do it for Alabama? For obvious reasons. I don't think I need to go into depth as to why I love the Tide. I think most of you know my story as it relates to Crimson Tide. All right, I love them. and always will. Raising my kids as fans, have a season tickets, own real estate in Tuscaloosa. Like I love Alabama. It's where we choose to live, and the reason why we live in Birmingham is because I went to Alabama. Like that's why we shouldn't require a lot of explanation. Uh, why do I love the Los Angeles Dodgers? Because every single Friday of my childhood, I used to go to baseball development camp, which was run by Reggie Smith. You probably don't even know who that is. I'm sure several of you have no idea. Frankly, I don't even know who the heck he was, but at the time, he was like one of the base coaches for the Dodgers. But he owned a baseball development camp, and we would go to baseball development camp. And then during that week of camp, and we'd go for almost, a handful of weeks of summer. I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks of summer. It was fun. It was super fun. It was really very little baseball, and it was more you get to play like scrimmage games and eat ices. It was delicious. And you get the red and blue icy, and it turned into purple, and it was like a mystery flavor. It was amazing. Great camp. But we used to go one of the days of the week. We would go to whatever Dodger game they had, and then my parents would take me to Dodger games forever. I went to my first Dodger game when I was 45 days old. I was born on May 10th, 1988. Within 2 months of my birth, I was at a Dodger game. Like my kids actually still wear a mini Dodger throwback starter jacket that I got as like a 2-year-old child. So like, that dates back to when I was living in Los Angeles. And it just and the Rangers were terrible when I was living in Dallas. So like it was very easy to just keep on keeping on with the team that had gotten me there. I grew up in the era where he had 6 or 7 straight NL Rookie of the Years, like Todd Hollandsworth, Raul Mondesi, Mike Piazza, Hideo Nomo, Eric Karros. Like all those guys were my childhood. It was the best. So that's why I love the Dodgers. And why do I love the Mavericks? I don't know. Why not? Because I lived in Dallas and they were someone to cheer for. So to be honest with you, I had the least amount of agony when the Mavs lose. But the rest of them hurt bad. Why do you do it? Say Bear, we will get your answer after the break. We'll get Damien's answer on the 17 teams he supports after the break, and we will, of course, visit with you as well. 205-834-9450. The pain is just so much, but it's so worth it. It's so worth it. Why do we do it? We also are going to play an interview I did with Kalen DeBoer a little later in the show. Kirby Smart has had some pretty phenomenal audio, and I think he's been extremely transparent this offseason. We'll listen to some of his sound. It's about 3 minutes, kind of long. But we'll listen to his sound from the other day on what needs to be done with the transfer portal. We also are going to listen to some comments that Greg Sankey's made over the last couple weeks. We have some audio pulled from that. So we have a really built-up show, but the theme of the show, not baseball bats, not Batgate or Little League sports, but fandom. Why do we do it, and why does it hurt so much? 205-834-9450. You can tweet into the show at Mac and Cube. We will get to some of your answers, Say Bears and Damien's, next on McElroy and Cubelic in the Morning, Jackson 94.5. Welcome back, McElroy, Cubelic, Good Morning, Jocks 94.5. Look, I kind of went through in the first segment if you're just joining us. Like, the pain of being a fan, this kind of revolves around the Dallas Stars exit last night. And look, getting to the Western Conference Finals, nothing to be ashamed of. But they've been there 3 years in a row. And last year and this year, they've lost to the Edmonton Oilers, and they've lost 7 of the 8 games to the Edmonton Oilers in a row. So, clearly they lost to them last year, so they lost 8 games in the last 2 years. But they've lost 7 of the last 8. Their one that they actually won was game 1 of this round, where they were down 3-1 going in the third period and scored 5 unanswered goals, giving us the false hope that they might actually have a chance this year, and then they went on to lose 4 straight. So the agony of defeat is too painful. It's just too painful today especially. But my question is, why do we do it? As a professional sports fan, I have been associated with 3 championships in my lifetime. One as a 10-year-old, one as a 23-year-old, and one now as a 37-year-old. 36-year-old at the time, actually. That was the Stars, the Mavericks, and the Dodgers last year. I don't count the COVID year. I just don't. So I've been a part of 3. Feel pretty good about that. It's not terrible. We're not the Chicago Cubs, but I've been a part of 174 disappointments. Like crushing defeats. And I'm just curious, why do we do it? I told you my why a little earlier. If you missed it, you can always download the podcast. But Saber, who are your teams and why do you do it?
I think the why is the highs outweigh the lows, even though for all of our teams, there are a hell of a lot more lows than highs. Granted, I know you in Alabama, that's different, but professionally, for you, there are way more lows than highs, and yet we chase that high. The 2 teams that I vehemently cheer for, one of them is the New Orleans Saints. I was born in New Orleans. You're kind of indoctrinated in that. You don't really have much of a choice. And I guess it helped when we moved up here I was born in 82, so in 88, I think, 87, 89, somewhere in there. There wasn't a professional sports team, so I didn't have to have that conflict. And so stuck with the Saints. And so when I was 28, February 2010, when they finally won one, I was absolutely elated. You won't believe the excitement. I was probably more excited, even though they won the Super Bowl and that was great, yes, and awesome and everything. I was even more excited when they won their first playoff game less than a decade prior. So I put up with a lot being a Saints fan, but also it represents home in that city. Collegiately, it's Georgia Tech. I didn't really have an affiliation, anything for them through when I was growing up, even through high school. I tried to get into Georgia Tech. They told me no, so I'm like, all right, I'm going to show you. And so I got into Emory. I went there, but I realized they didn't really have much of a music program. But they did have a program to where it was cross education, where if their class is at another university not offered at Emory, you're allowed to take it for credit. Well, with them not having much of a music program, Georgia Tech had one. Hey, I can be in their band. I can do all this, and that. So I signed up to be in their band. So I'm like, got in, take that. And that was, even though I had been to college games before, I actually saw Cole Cubelic play once in my junior year in high school. We played at halftime and saw this big, bald white dude on the field. I was like, oh, he looks kind of cool. And sure enough, ended up working with him. I didn't really have an inclination to Alabama or Auburn either way. I'm like, I knew and liked and respected both teams, but I didn't really care who won or lost. Didn't really care that much about LSU because mostly in New Orleans, when you grow up, it's all about pro and not college. So when I got to Tech, it was like, okay, finally I loved football, but I never really had a college team to gravitate toward. And so it was like, okay, I can kind of get behind this. Yes, it helped that I was, playing, and it also helped really that they were winning because, yes, it was Florida State's conference, but the second best team for the most part around that time was Tech. They were rocking
really
pretty well at that time. So it helped that not only were they good, but being in and around Atlanta, I just kind of fell in love with that. And so I was with them for most of my adult life, and then they decided to go with the triple option. At that point, I renounced my fandom because I was
Done?
like, no grown adult college institution should be running this. I understand why Army. Now I understand why they run it. They don't have the athletes to compete, so they need some kind of. I get that. You are in the heart of the South. You are in Atlanta, Georgia, and you're telling me you can't recruit people to run some kind of offense? I am out. And it's only been the last little bit that I've started to go back with them because I told if you're going to keep running this gimmick offense, I'm done with you, son. And I had been done with them for a good solid while, and I started to come back about 3-4 years once Paul Johnson left.
It runs deep.
Yeah,
I think that
it
makes
did.
perfect sense. It's hard to pull for an offense where you know you have a limited ceiling, kind of. Like that's got to be remarkably frustrating. But then again, like you chose a team whose expectation is not to necessarily win national championships. I think that is a healthier perspective. Like making the playoffs would be a remarkable achievement for Georgia Tech, right? I mean, yes,
Absolutely,
they won a
yes.
national championship. Are you kidding me? That'd be amazing. They did win one, by the way. So, but it's been 35 years since that went down. So it has been done. It's been done before, but it's not in the near term, in the modern era, something that feels within reason. So your level, but what is your level of success? Like, what is success through the eyes of a Georgia Tech fan in a given year?
I think for most fans, I do think it's also shifted a little bit because they were down for so much and so long, and I think not only has Georgia just vehemently surpassed them, a lot of the rest of the conference, they're probably along the lines of not quite Kentucky, but say like Arkansas in the SEC. Like you're looking up at so much now that I feel like for them, success is a solid bowl game, like having maybe 9 wins, but at least 7, probably 8. So it's like, okay, hey, that's success right now. Now moving forward, since it looks like they're on the upswing, and it also looks like that the ACC is for the most part kind of gettable. Yes, I know Clemson's there, and Miami looks like they're on the rise too. But Florida State has shown that okay, they can kind of fall off. So it feels like if they keep this trajectory, the expectation will start to be double-digit wins semi-consistently. But right now, it's don't fall backwards. You show an
Yeah,
improvement, just don't take a step back.
fair enough. I think that's perfectly reasonable. Damien, give us your fan story.
For the Tennessee Titans, I was 12 years
Oh,
old. I was 12 years old. Kerry Collins was the quarterback at this time, and it was right around Christmas. So my family got me tickets to the Pittsburgh Steelers and Tennessee Titans game in Nashville, and Tennessee was reeling. That thing, they were like, I think they might either were the number 1 or number 2 seed in that game, getting ready for the playoffs, and I mean, we beat the brakes off of them. I think it was like 31-14. I mean, the Steelers, they were reeling. They were a pretty good team at that time, and we knocked them off. And I was locked in at the Titans the entire ride. And then we drafted Marcus Mariota a few years later, and I only doubled down. And that was during my time when I just got to college. So I mean, after Saturday, after the games, I was dialed in for Sunday. Like I was dialed in on what was going on Sunday. And this is when the Tennessee Titans were kind of it was some dark days. It was some dark days nonetheless. But I found myself every Sunday tuning in, no matter how I had to do it. If we were blacked out because they were showing, Tom Brady's New England Patriots team, I would find a way to watch the Tennessee Titans play football that Sunday. And, in 2019, we were 9-7, a team that just barely got into the playoffs. The first playoff game we're on the road the entire time because we just got in. We knock off Tom Brady in his final game in New England, send him on to Tampa Bay. The next week, we had the number 2 seed, Baltimore Ravens, in Baltimore. Knocked them off. Ryan Tannehill only completed 7 passes in the game, but Derrick Henry did run for, I think, like $165, so they kind of helped as well. And in the AFC Championship, we have a 14-3 lead over the Kansas City Chiefs. And right before halftime, Patrick Mahomes before we really knew he was about to be Patrick Mahomes, he has this scramble for about 30-something yards where it felt like everybody on the Tennessee Titans had a chance to bring him down, and he ends up in the end zone, and we end up losing. And there were hopes and dreams that, hey, we can turn this thing around. We've got the team now. We see we can do it. This is Mike Vrabel's first year. Like we're like, hey, this is going to be the future. We got this. We drafted Jeffrey Simmons that year. Like the 2019 team to me is still like a team that we didn't even deserve. We didn't necessarily think we had these expectations of a team that's going to the playoffs and going to be in an AFC championship game. And we were one game away from the Super Bowl that we never returned to. Like, so we haven't been to the AFC championship since then. And also our franchise has reverted back to some old ways. And concluding the dark days with Will Levis as a quarterback for 2 years.
Your fandom was locked in when you were 23?
No, my family was locked in at 12. My family
2019, that was just a few years ago.
That's when
Kerry Collins was there. He gave us the brief, Kerry Collins, but no, it was actually more like when Mariota got there, and then like for real it got locked in. It's like, dude, what are we doing?
No, I was a fringe fan.
You can't tell me the hurdles that led to fandom. You have to tell me the fandom is one specific moment. One specific moment, and usually it's in victory, especially when as a young child.
It was
at 23.
We knocked off the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2008. It's just after that we had no more success. So it was like, dang, why am I putting myself through this? And when we up. I was a Georgia Bulldog type fan for a while, where we can bring it. I'm a jaw with you, but when we up, we all the way up.
Wow. Let's just make sure that everybody knows that was Damian today. And let me also allow anyone that's listened to this show for more than 10 minutes know that Damian is not at all. This is not at all surprising with what we just heard. Like it just. He has levels of fandom, and he wasn't fully committed until he was 23. And even yet then, there's still moments of hesitation. That right there, my friends, is why we love Damian, and also why at the same time we loathe his fandom. But that's okay. We also want to get your calls, and we also want to get to your story a little bit, because like everybody's got a different story, but it really was more along the lines of. And it's easy to kind of say, well, here I love this because my dad or this. A lot of it I do think has to do with what your family cheered for, where you lived, the sense of pride it brings you to watch that organization or team. But I really think the root of this conversation is why do we do it? Because the agony, and I'm telling you, man, I've experienced so much more disappointment in fandom than I have happiness, but it's still so worth it. Like, that's what I keep telling myself today. It's like, even though my team bowed out early last night and was down 3-0 in the first 10 minutes, it wasn't even close. It was a complete beatdown. There were a couple moments in which they gave us false hope, but I refused at that point to gain any glass half full perspective. I was in too dark of a place. But we continue to do it every year. We get those jerseys on. We buy those tickets. We buy that paraphernalia. We go and buy plane tickets to watch games, and it's so worth it. But my gosh, the losses hurt so bad. They really do. Season enders especially. So 888-573-5335. No, that's old. That's my old number, isn't it?
Yeah, that's feels like serious.
Dang, that's Sirius XM from like 6 years ago. Heck yeah, we're back.
That'd be some old lady. Who's calling me?
I'm about to say, if we're going back to Sirius XM, you can go call Dusty and Danny right now. That's totally fine. You could bust them and tell them your fan story. Just totally catch them off guard. They'll lose it. But 205-834-9450. That's 205-834-9450. You can also tweet into the show or text into the show on that number as well. Tweet into the show at Mac and Cube, and we will get to some of your responses next. Why do we do it? That's the simple question today. Theme of the day is, with all the great things that come with being a fan, there are often much more difficult things that come with the fan. I feel like the disappointments far outweigh the happiness, but we continue to do it every single year. and it never fails and it never gets old. But help us understand why. Next on McElroy and Cubelic. Good morning, Jocks 94.5. Welcome back, McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. It's a great day here. I'm actually in Alexander City right now. Love being down here. Love being at the lake. Love all the wonderful people of Alex City. We actually yesterday, for the first time, it was a little bit of a rainy day, went into downtown Alexander City. Really a cool place. Went to a couple neat restaurants. Meredith went and looked at a couple of typical like antique shopping, if you will. We haven't really done that. When we've been at the lake, we've been at the lake, but went into town yesterday and really had a great time. So Love this town. Love being down here and love hanging lakeside. That's for sure. The other thing I love is Crocker Moving Service. They're a local company owned by an Iraq War veteran, Eric Crocker. Crocker believes in hiring movers you can trust to complete full background checks and run drug tests on every single employee. These are good guys. You can trust them in your home. They need your whole home packed up and move. Your company headquarters moved across the country, or you just want them to come rearrange your living room. These guys got you covered. They also do deliveries for furniture that you've purchased need to get to your home. So call or visit them online today for a free quote. The website is CrockerMovingServices.com. That's CrockerMovingServices.com. Support your veterans by choosing Crocker Moving Services for your next move. They actually helped me move down here, believe it or not. So appreciate those guys at Crocker Moving Services. All right, we had a good topic that we're on today, and it centers around the agony of disappointment as a fan, and that we volunteer for this. It's not like anyone is forcing us against our will to be fans of a certain institution or team or organization, what have you. Like, we volunteered for this. We want this disappointment. We want this type of exposure. And last night, my son experienced remarkable disappointment. So to see it on his face firsthand helped me better understand that feeling again. As a fan, I'm hardened. I'm used to it. I know the Stars are going to blow it. I'm used to it by now. This is not new. But for him, it's only been a couple years that he can really remember the Stars, and he's only ever known disappointment. But to see it on his face last night kind of led me to wanting to talk about this today. And my simple question is, why do we do it? And we all have that reason. We all have that moment in our life that made us a fan. My question is, the tough moments completely outweigh the good moments more often than not. But it's so worth it. So we will go to the text and the Twitter line. We will start with John Saber, who's going to read a tweet into the show, at Mac and Cube. You're always welcome to join us there. You also are always welcome to call the show if you want, but texting might be a little easier this time of day. So, Saber, where are we going?
All right, a few tweets that have come in. Jason Gardner 17 tweets in, grew up in Atlanta, so a Falcons fan, went to Alabama, so a Bama fan, and picked the Nashville Predators when my Thrashers left Atlanta. So look at what I endured in 2017. Oof. Oh, that is very unfortunate. If I can make it through that, I can make it through any sports challenge as a fan. 0-3. Yeah, that's
Ouch.
2017 does. Oh, whew. And then
that's tough. I mean, obviously 17 was the Deshaun Watson, early season. The Preds lost. And
then the greatest Super Bowl ever, 28-3.
28-3.
Yeah.
Which is that's insane to have the disappointment of the Deshaun Watson comeback and the Super Bowl within just a couple weeks of each other. That's a hard one.
That's painful.
That's brutal. I mean, that is absolutely brutal. We got some more.
Crimson Yinzer, Jason tweets in, became a Knicks fan in 1990. Loved to watch Ewing play. His fadeaway J locked me in. Still my favorite player of all time. Still my favorite NBA team. Watched Jerome Bettis truck people on Monday Night Football in 97, and he instantly became my favorite player and Steelers, my team to this day. What is this, Cole? Wow, okay.
No, Knicks are not good enough to be Cole's team.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
Cole's got some bandwagon in him. Don't let him tell you differently.
And lastly, JTD_73 tweets in, as a Tennessee fan, I've asked myself why plenty of times, specifically in football, yet I'd never traded best sports on earth. I will also say, as a Vols loss hurts more than anything. I'm over a Titans loss in 5 minutes. A Vols loss takes a few days.
Well said. It's so true. Like, I don't know why we do it. Like, we volunteer for this pain. Who in their right mind, like, you drop, and I think Josh Pate uses this reference, and I like it. Like, you drop an alien from outer space down, and you're sitting at a fire pit or an outdoor smoker, whatever. You're cooking something or you're hanging out. You're just standing there, just chopping it up, having a conversation. Try explaining to an otherworldly being why you support things that make you sad. Like, who on planet Earth would do that? Like why do we do it? Like, they rip our hearts out. And like, okay, yes, we might win a championship, and the hope that we could potentially do it is always there, and that's why I understand it. But golly, at some point I'm going to be too old for this. Like, I can't keep doing this every year. I can't get so invested to the point where when they lose, it takes me 2 days to recover. I just can't do it. Damien, I know we have a bunch of texts into the show. Where are we going?
Yeah, we have Robert who texted in, and he says, I grew up a diehard Alabama football and basketball fan since the 1970s through some long championship droughts. I'm also a huge Braves and Steelers fan. I'm different because the Steelers had the same colors as my high school team, and grew up watching the Steelers as a kid, despite of how well and disciplined they play. He said, I'm a Braves fan because I grew up 4 hours from Atlanta, went to my first MLB game in 1985. The championships, the Braves, the Steelers won. I fully cherish because of my long droughts like I did at Alabama. And he also
Braves
says,
have the Brave. Just for a second, the Braves fans. I know we give y'all a hard time because there are a lot of bandwagon Braves fans. Let's
Yes.
just be
Yeah.
real, okay? Like you
left-
can say what
yeah.
You left in the early 2000s, and y'all inexplicably came back a little bit ago. Yeah.
there are a lot of bandwagon Braves fans. Guess what? There's a lot of bandwagon Dodger fans. I don't think there's a lot of bandwagon Stars fans, but if they are, we'll welcome you with open arms. Welcome to the trouble train. But like there are bandwagon fans at a lot of these places, so like I can't give you too hard of a time. But the Braves enduring what they endured in the 90s and early 2000s, going to that many consecutive playoff runs and only having one championship to show for it, that had to have been pretty painful. Like I have to kind of acknowledge the fact that those people did have to persevere through some tough times for sure.
Yeah, and Robert also says that he's a San Antonio Spurs fan because of David Robinson. Started in 1999, even though I love Magic Johnson as a kid.
All right, we have more too. We're gonna get to them on the other side. I just want to know why we do it. Like I love your stories. I love knowing why you love the specific teams. I especially love I loved the Knicks because of Patrick Ewing and the fadeaway jump. Like that's just awesome, you know? Like we all know why. We all have that reason. We know our why. That's easy. But the reason why we keep coming back is pretty remarkable. I don't know. I can't wrap my head around it, but it's so worth it. Only to have our hearts ripped out yet again on an annual basis. It just is what it is. Look, I hate to be depressing today. I'm really not trying to be. I'm actually trying to bring light and poke fun at myself for being so bummed that the Stars lost again last night. And they've lost now 8 of the last 9 games to the Edmonton Oilers. It should not have come as a surprise, and yet it always does. When we come back, we'll continue with more of your texts into the show, and we have a bunch of them right here on McElroy and Cubelic in the Morning, Jocks 94.5. Welcome back. Good Friday. Kind of a short week. Things kind of flown by. So appreciate all of you guys involving yourself in the show today, texting into the show. See a lot of your interaction. It's been a lot of fun. Topic of the morning so far has been, why do we do the fandom thing? Like, had my heart ripped out again last night, and it never fails. The Stars are going to let me down. But it's worth it. It's so worth it. But goodness gracious alive, the vulnerability that we experience is just brutal. We got Jeff on the phone. Jeff, what's going on, my friend? Help me understand your fandom and why we do it, my brother.
Hey, brother. Greg, you're going to love this one. Grew up in Shelby County, played Little League Baseball early 70s, mid-70s. And every summer, when we would go to the Braves games, and these Braves of the mid-70s were the Mike Lum and the Ralph Garr era.
Yep.
And if the Braves would get runners on first and second, man, it was a win. I mean, first and second, because they were not very good. And, being 13, 14 years old, Pony League guy, I'm like going for a winner. And that time, the Dodgers, of course, they had Davey Lopes and Russell and Say.
Oh, yeah.
All those guys. So I became a Dodger fan and have been a diehard Dodger fan since then. In fact, I'm driving right now to a Braves game. I'm not sure who I'm going to root for tonight. The Braves or the I really hate them, man. I mean, they've just, my dad and my brother loved them. But, I became a Dodger fan, became an LA sports fan back in '74, and, with the Lakers and all that. Kind of worked out. So,
about to say, you picked a pretty good time. You picked a good time to latch on to LA sports. I feel like the 80s with the Lake Show and the Dodgers, of course, had a nice run there in the late 70s, early 80s, and obviously throughout. I mean, the Dodgers are always good. But, Jeff, I appreciate the call, man. It's amazing to me the amount of sacrifice we make for our teams, and I love it. It's the best. But, man alive, it's painful. It is. It's so painful, and it's so worth it. In the off chance in which the Dodgers go and win the World Series again this year and they make it 2 in a row, like, it'll be so worth it. The 36 years of pain that I experienced is worth it for the last 2 World Series championships.
Now, how do you explain teams like the Jets or the Browns that
I don't
never
look, as a Jets fan, I support them because the owner was nice to me. And they treated me
you
well.
worked
So,
there,
like,
different.
you know what? Like, that's why I like the Jets. I used to like the Cowboys, but I just can't root for them anymore. I just can't. As a kid, they just broke my heart too many times. The entire time my dad was there, 10, 12 years or however long it was, they won 1 playoff game. So, yeah, not rooting for the Cowboys anymore. When we come back, we'll listen to some audio from Kalen DeBoer next on Mac and Cube. Welcome back to McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, Jocks 94.5. Good first hour. You could download the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Just to look up Mac and Cube. Talking about the pain of fandom. It's just the best. It's the best pain there is. And the breakthrough that you get and the elation that you get in victory outweighs the pain. And I think you'll be able to latch onto those championships forever. And the pain is more fleeting, but the pain in the near term is just so hard to stomach. It really is. It's so hard to stomach. So we took some turns going around the table with Saber, Damien, and myself. Tell you why we're fans of the teams that we support. And some reasons as to why we continue to come back. And we got some of you guys to weigh in, and we very much appreciate a lot of the texts and calls that we got on the subject matter. We'll revisit it a little later in the show, but we do have some business to get to. And the business that you can get when you go up to Bill Smith Buick GMC is the best kind of business. The business in which you really feel like the dealer is working for you and really has your best interest in mind, because they're going to give you deals that you just won't find anywhere else, like a GMC Sierra 1500. This is a beautiful SLT 4x4 loaded with leather. $66,000 was what you pay elsewhere. Over $66,000. But at Bill Smith, you can take off $14,000, get you out the door just over $52,000. Deals like that keep you coming back. That's why 75% of their business repeat customers, because you have a better experience when you shop with Bill Smith. Take a short drive out to Coleman. You'll be glad you did. Go see Andy Cole and Jonathan Yeager. You can check out the used car superstore. It doesn't matter what your budget is. They can find a solution for you by just going and checking out Bill Smith Buick. You can also look online at BillSmithBuickGMC.com. All right. We had a chance. Excuse me. I had a chance a couple weeks back to visit with Kalen DeBoer, and we have not played this conversation, but we figured today we kind of struck out on guests. Hopefully everybody's having a good short week, and maybe they just turned this into a long vacation. I certainly hope that's the case. So we figured we can play an interview that we had in a conversation that we had with Kalen DeBoer a couple weeks back. And he seems, and I'll just say this before we get to the actual audio here coming up, he seems so much more comfortable. He seems so much more at peace. And he seems like he's really taking a liking to this team. And I want you to listen for those things throughout this conversation, because I think you might notice some of the same things that I noticed in my visit with him. So here it is, little conversation with Kalen DeBoer. And I've said this countless times throughout the offseason. I think it's very easy in year number one to focus on what could have been, what was, all this other stuff. I've chosen to kind of focus on the turnover going into last year, a new voice for the first time in nearly 2 decades, and the high points of last year. So when you kind of chronicle that year one, what kind of perspective have you gained from that experience?
Well, I think that's the big thing, is that now we have experiences that we've all shared, or most of us. There's new players coming in. There's very little staff turnover, but there's always going to be something, and we have these experiences now that we've shared, the good experiences, the experiences that didn't go as planned, that you have to learn from. And that helps us grow. We really dissect everything. You always are trying to prepare, right? Whether it's game management type things, situations. And that's what you do as a football coach. You think about all those things, and the ones that you're going to have more often, obviously you practice them more, and you try to cover the ones that might be once every 2 or 3 seasons. But there's still those feelings and how you're going to handle it. And you talk it through, and I try to bring up examples of maybe what the guys in 2023 went through. I try to reflect on a time or two there. But when you didn't go through it together, it just isn't the same. And now we've been through it together. So we've been, I think, very thorough going back to even the winter phase of conditioning and meeting time to go through all the different things, the critical situations we were in, the turnovers we forced, the turnovers we lost, penalties both ways, other situations other teams had that maybe apply to us, and ones we almost were in. there's just also another level of relationships that we have now as a coaching staff together, but also a coaching staff with our players.
I feel like, Coach, you really are, and just knowing you personally now for a number of years, I feel like you, as much as anybody, are able to really connect with the player. I think that was exemplified by how many guys stayed, how many guys, even after one spring last year, said, yeah, you know what, I want to play for this guy. And I feel like that relationship has gotten deeper. And as a result, you can ask more of the players. Now, I know it's always with good intentions, but when you have that credibility established with the players, are you able to ask more of them? How does that work?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I think it naturally happens because you try to really put yourself in those adverse situations as often as you can. But because then a game comes along, it's going to happen, and you got to be able to trust. And I think that's the key word is trust that what you're saying or what they're, when I'm telling a player or our coaches are telling a player that they know it's for our good, not just because you're upset or anything like that. And that, the real intentions are to help them be the best they can be, bring value to who they are, football player as a person. And that is nothing about them personally. It's about what we're trying to do together to help everyone reach the goals that they have individually and we have collectively. And so, just more time together. And we are very intentional with how we spend that time together in building our culture, having the expectations, but most importantly, just growing the relationships that have that, again, trust that we all want the same thing. And we all are here for a reason. We all stayed here for a reason, chose here to be here for a reason, and that's to do great things at Alabama.
Yeah, it certainly feels like the continuity, and you just listen to the players. There's just a deeper understanding of culturally what it's going to be like, and it's different than the previous staff. But I think that's great. You got to be you, and I think that's encouraging. You bring in Ryan Grubb, I think it's funny when I've talked to Ryan Grubb, and this was, gosh, dating back to the Washington days. He goes, "Yeah, I'm the bad cop to Kalen's good cop," and I think that's kind of amazing that you guys are able to complete each other. You've worked together so long, you're able to kind of complete each other's sentences, and hey, you can be there to love them up, and he can be there to rip them apart, and vice versa. I think that's a tremendous balance that can be created offensively. So, with the addition of Coach Grubb, what does your offense now have that maybe it lacked a year ago?
Well, yeah, I think there is a balance. I think that's a great word to use that I take into consideration with all my coaches because every guy coaches different. And, I might try to offset the balance with some position groups, but obviously there's got to be a balance of what we're trying to do when it comes to, who you are truly as a coach, how you operate. And, when you talk about completing each other's sentences, I've had times where, a few years ago, I can remember a specific situation where I pulled a player over to me and I said something to him, and his position coach, who I also had been with for a while, had been with this player for both conversations with me, and I didn't see the conversation he had with Coach Grubb. And we said the exact same thing, almost the exact same way, and I didn't know he had already hit on it, but I think that's just, when you're together long enough, you've had so many conversations, you've been in so many situations together. It doesn't mean that you don't change. You got to keep evolving. It doesn't mean that you always feel like you got the same exact feeling. I mean, every play caller is going to call games differently, whether it's how I would have done it. That doesn't mean that's how, Ryan Grubb's going to do it. It falls in line with the parameters of how we want to manage a game, what we feel are the key plays. We lay out a game plan, and I see that, but, it doesn't mean it's always the same because you have your own personality, you have your own vibe, you have your own rhythm. And I think that's what play callers do. I didn't want that and someone beating me over the head because I had a plan laid out for that next drive when I was calling plays. And so in between series, I think is that time, hey, what do you got? Or you lay out what you feel is important. And then, obviously there's the big third down, fourth down calls that, when you do get that little break, maybe it's a TV timeout or something like that, or a review, you get a chance a little bit more to talk about it. But There's stall tactics sometimes you can use, at times to have a little longer conversation. We use that in big moments, to help us make sure we are exactly on the same page. But, there's a trust. There's a trust you have, and that's really what, I think you asked what he brings and how we move forward. There's a trust that I have with him, but there's also some continuity that he has with other coaches on our staff, with Nick Sheridan. And I know that's been helpful for Ryan to speed up his process of getting to know our personnel. The why, why did we do this? Why did we do that a year ago when you're reviewing the film? And then also Jamarcus Shepard, and just that's an integral kind of threesome right there that have been together for a few years and, speak the same language as well.
Yeah, it's a great group, and Coach Shepard does an amazing job. And Nick, I think, did a good job last year. And if you look at the personnel last year, you're going to naturally call it and kind of gravitate towards what your quarterback's comfortable with. And we know that Jalen Milroe was super dynamic with the ball in his hands. Quarterback run was a heavy part of what you guys wanted to be, especially in red zone and in short yardage situations. Now, looking at the quarterback situation with Ty Simpson, Austin Mack, and or Keelan Russell, depending on who emerges from that three-way quarterback battle, I can't imagine quarterback run being utilized as much as it was utilized a year ago. So how much will the offense evolve based around the quarterback's skill set and comfort level?
Yeah, no. And I think all three quarterbacks we have do have the ability to extend plays. That I'm speaking your language, quarterback, what they're doing as far as moving the chains, using their legs to keep plays alive. And Austin Mack, even as big as he is, once he gets moving, he covers a lot of ground. And Ty was a great dual threat, and Keelan has the same abilities to make people miss, and probably faster than most people think. But I think we are more similar as a group, as you mentioned, I think in your own words, than maybe the diversity of who we had as far as skill sets and how different they were, and how you wanted to use it. Jalen, as far as, explosiveness, I don't know if I've ever seen anything like it with a quarterback that could use his legs or had that luxury in that fashion. And you have to make sure you're utilizing the skill sets of your players. Jalen certainly had like I refer to it as a superpower that we had to make sure we had incorporated into our plan.
Yeah, he was dynamic for sure. The quarterback competition, I know right now you have three guys all are repping at the position, trying to figure out, all right, how do we want to maybe cut it down to two or what have you. But what do you want to see from your quarterback? What is the most important aspect of securing that spot and being your starter here in year number 2?
Yeah, I think just continued growth. They're all on the right track. They're all super invested, as you would expect. And they're all just, again, I talked about a healthy competition and who they are as people. They are finding their ways to lead in their own way, because that's probably the hardest thing when you have a quarterback battle. You want them not to step on each other's toes, but they also need to kind of take it and run with it when they have their opportunities, and they need to speak up. That's when you really find out, who are the guys that the rest of the team follows along with, not just the plays on the field, but who they are as leaders. So these guys are again, balancing the reps. Keelan started out lower, and as he really earned more and more reps, we gave him those, and they're all making those strides in their own ways. Ty taking the steps. And so I think I've mentioned many times, we're not where we need to be. And that might sound like a knock on those guys, but that's expected. Like, there's a progression, there's a process these guys got to be on. None of them have taken this overwhelming number of college snaps, especially in a game, much less, with the ones on the practice field. So we're trying to, keep them moving, speed up the process for all of them, while we're also balancing the reps that each of them are getting. And, they're earning those reps. And I really appreciate the way they've handled it, and trying not to press too much is the thing for them. I think the pressure of fighting for a quarterback job is probably as stressful as anything they're going to go through. And, there's moments in a game when, 100,000 people are screaming. That's pretty stressful, but what they're doing, trying to win that job, that's managing some level of stress too, and they got to perform under those own conditions. And I think that's one of the adverse situations that you actually put these guys in before they step on the football field game one that actually can help them.
There's Kalen DeBoer. That's half the interview. We'll get to the other half here in just a moment. You can hear talking greatly about the quarterback situation. And I know that in evaluating his past quarterback competitions, and this goes back to Washington, Michael Penix, for as good as he was not named the starter until about 6 or 7 days before their first game. And he transferred over from Indiana. I think a lot of people anticipated that it was going to be him, but he had to beat out an incumbent, and that was not easy. So it took a little more time than people might realize, and ultimately it was the right decision, and Michael Penix went on to become a top 10 pick in the NFL draft 2 years later and nearly lead the Washington Huskies to a national championship. So it is definitely something that's going to take some time, but I trust Kalen DeBoer and his staff to find who the right guy ultimately will be, and I trust that they will put that guy, whoever it is, in a very, very good situation to have success this upcoming season because of how deep and versatile their offensive scheme can be. We'll see. We will get back to more Kalen DeBoer conversation in just a moment right here on McElroy and Cubelic Good Morning Jocks 94.5. Welcome back. It's Friday, May 30th. It's 8:20 here in Alabama. We appreciate everybody for being with us today. It's a good Friday. Fun time. It's been a big week. We've had SEC spring meetings. We've had a bunch of other things coming out. We will revisit some of the topics on SEC spring meetings here in just a little bit, but we're in the middle of a great conversation I had with Kalen DeBoer just a couple weeks back. Hadn't had a chance to play it in its entirety, but figured today with Cole being out and with really a lot of people that are not really around to join the show to talk big picture, figured it's appropriate time to revisit some of this discussion. So we are about halfway through it. If you missed any of the first part, you can download it wherever you get your podcast by searching Mac and Cube. Let's go to part 2 from our conversation with Kalen DeBoer.
Perfect world. Do you have like a day where you'd like to have it decided? Is granted, they got to go earn it. They got to go take it. I understand that, but in your mindset as a coach for the last 20 some odd years, is there a time frame where it's like, all right, guys, we got to decide?
Mm-hmm. There's been roughly a similar kind of time frame throughout fall camp, and the last week and a half. I mean, we usually have a little bit longer of a phase of game. We call them bonus practices leading up to week 1. And, there's a weekend before and then a few days before that. That's kind of when you really for sure like to have the starter named and him be able to start really being in sync with his receiving core, gelling that way and really dialing on the reps. But, if you feel like you're at that point earlier, it's been a few practices earlier, maybe a week earlier at some point. I've had a lot of these, kind of competitions over the years. As you mentioned, we do it for 25 years, probably, I don't know if it's 3, 4, 5, but there's been a handful of competitions to some level where there's 2 guys, 3 guys, a guy coming in that's a transfer, all that. You really got to be thorough. I think, in the end, it's who can move the ball down the field. People sometimes get caught up into who's grading out, who had the best, completion percentage, all those things. Those are all important, right? But I think in the end, it's who's moving the ball down the field for, the ones, the twos, most consistently when you're here in practice each and every day.
And it to me, and this is no disrespect to last year's group whatsoever, but I do feel like last year's receiving group. Look, Ryan was amazing, but let's be real. Ryan wasn't on campus a year ago today, which is insane that he did what he did, and played as well as he did. Jeremy Bernard had never been in a traditional, hey, give me the ball type of guy. He'd been a gadget guy and had been very effective in that role. But the other guys, they were kind of trying to figure out, all right, how do I fit in? It feels like with the addition of Isaiah Horton, with the progress that we're expecting from Ryan Williams, with Jeremy Bernard being a little more comfortable being a featured player, it feels like the supporting cast is just much better than it was a year ago for whoever takes the quarterback spot. Is that a fair assessment of how much that room has grown?
Yeah, I think that's a really accurate assessment. And some of it isn't their fault. It's just a matter of time that it takes to learn the system. And another year now, I just saw, and I knew this was going to happen. These guys were talking about it over a month ago. Many of them going and meeting at a location here in the month of May. And we've cautioned them not to do too much, because the summer is going to be as hard as one they've ever been through. But, just the ability to get together and them doing it on their own and that desire to do it, and then also know what to work on, and like you said, Ryan wouldn't have known maybe other than a few little things, what those route concepts were. Germ knew it because he was part of the offense before, but he's still got to translate it to the other guys in the room. And then I think just the talent level, the consistencies. I mean, these guys aren't slotted into one position now. They can play multiple positions. They can move around. They can have really productive sessions, whether it's individually or 7-on-7s, just whatever workout they're in. Film room, together, talking through it. A lot of them are watching their one-on-one clips from the spring. Maybe even going back to last year, just talking through the details on where they expect the ball. There's a lot more of just the verbiage, the in sync, the details. I think it's really what you get round 2 here that you didn't have maybe a year ago.
Yeah, I would imagine that group collectively, I'm very encouraged and excited to see how the offense performs. Defensively, it's like, hey, let's rinse and repeat. Like we did a lot of really good things down the stretch last year, and I think changing the system, man. I think people are like, oh, well, they just went from man to zone. It's not that easy, you know. And it's, by the way, there's a lot of man now too. But terminology, comfort level within the system, I think there was a bit of a learning curve there, and Coach Womack's group down the stretch really started to find themselves. But the one area that I'm going to be really curious about is the pass rush, and how do you create that pass rush this upcoming year, knowing there's so many new faces and guys that are expected to have increased roles from where they were a year ago.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think the man zone thing, it's never even how you planned. I know you can look at a coordinator's history and what he did, and Coach Womack, and kind of know that that's maybe the direction you want to go. But I remember specifically through much of the season, us talking about the percentages and it being way more man than probably what we originally thought going in. And a lot of that's the skill set of your players, but also some of that is just trying to maybe force the issue on some aggression, whether it's the pass rush, as you referred to, and us trying to manufacture that. I think there's some of that schematically, and then there's also a technical thing that comes into play as far as our guys. Just more experience when you think about LT and Jamarian Latham, and just go Quay Rusaw. You just keep going down the line. That's some of the edge guys, and then they take that in the interior wise. And I think again, it always comes down to you got to win your one-on-one battle, but all of them working in sync, and us understanding the strengths of just the interior push that maybe a Tim Keenan can bring and how best to utilize him. James Smith, a couple new faces in there. We don't have Tim anymore, but a lot of consistency, a lot of continuity to where we can tweak it. The number of calls, maybe, it isn't necessarily the call sheet, but it's how many times you call certain things. There's still got to be an aggression. That's how we're going to play when it comes to pressures and so forth, forcing the issues, the coverages that come along with it. I think a lot of it, though, comes down to just finishing a play. There's some guys that they got home and they got there, but they just got to get the quarterback on the ground. And nowhere their help is at as far as, the quarterback's going to move to this spot. They aren't going to be able to do that because they trust Tim Keenan's got that push inside, or James Smith, or any of these guys that we have interior wise. So collectively, they're just another hopefully level that we take this that I think you saw. And again, consistently the second half of the year, we played very sound and solid defense. Stayed away for the most part from the explosive plays. We were better on third down and fourth down than we were early in the season. Again, that was guys being comfortable, and I'm looking forward to taking those next steps with so much continuity returning.
A couple big picture questions, Coach, before we get you out of here. We appreciate your time today. Look, last year is kind of like drinking water through a fire hose, I would imagine, as this just a new frontier, and being at Alabama in the spotlight, and just the enormity of the role, and trying to learn the SEC, trying to learn your personnel, trying to make sure you can field a team with 46 guys that go in the portal. Like I don't know how you did what you did last year, but now looking back and knowing into year number 2, how much better of a handle do you have on what you're going to see week in and week out playing against SEC competition?
Yeah, I think there's that for me, but then there's also the staff. There's some guys that were here that knew, but then I think it's just collectively. It's our staff knowing exactly. What that schedule is going to look like for us week in and week out, how fall camp can be planned, and you can have meeting on meeting on meeting, but until you've gone through it, those details of them knowing to expect. I think one thing that's, we had really just 2 coaches that came with me. We talked about them earlier, Nick Sheridan and Jamarcus Shepard a year ago, that had been through a season. A lot of times we've been fortunate to have 7, 8 coaches that move with you to a spot. They pretty much know, how we're going to operate when we see this type of defense or this type of offense, what camp and what each phase is going to look like. Those staff meetings right now are much easier to go through. We're still making the tweaks. It's not just always pick up and put down. we got to make sure we're always evolving and thinking about how we can make it better and how we got to adjust. But that's been the pleasant piece about year two, and obviously the experiences that you just referred to of being in the SEC, and we had played pretty much the same exact schedule, just flip flopped home and away. And so, we have those experiences too. Obviously, those guys, who we are as well.
And finally, Coach, looking at just kind of the recruiting, I know we talked prior to the interview. We talked briefly about all the guys that are coming in and how the calendar's changed. Well, a big question was, all right, he's never recruited the South. Like, all right, that to me is the most overblown. If you can talk to people, you can recruit anywhere. I thought that was a little overblown, but now understanding the landscape and recruiting to Alabama. I know that you had a great recruiting class last year, but I would imagine your expectations this year continue to attract top tier talent are as high as they've ever been. So in being able to create those relationships and that continuity with the 18-year-olds now that will be signing their letters of intent in a few months, how much further along are you than you were a year ago?
Yeah, I think they're, especially regionally down here in the Southeast, anywhere in the South, kind of in our recruiting territories, there's much more just familiarity. All that exists. There's the relationships have taken to the next level. And I think, I got a good group, a good staff around me, whether it's on the field staff, off the field staff. I knew that coming in that had to be, again, balance would be the word I'd probably use of guys that I wanted, that I knew well, but also ones that we needed to have on staff that knew the Southeast and could help us hit the ground running. And I thought we did a good job last year. I think this year now it's just continuing to fill in the gaps. You're going to recruit across the board every position, I think every single year. But now it's how do you continue to add, where are the areas where, okay, we know exactly what we're losing next year, who we might lose to the NFL, how we got to get better with the recruiting, who can play early in their career and help us, And so it's, I think, another level of just decision making. Also, the recruiting process. And I mean, it doesn't matter where you're at in the country. A lot of the same principles apply when it comes to recruiting. It's relationships. Obviously, there's an NIL factor these days. For every coach across the country, that has evolved. And the timeline of when we're recruiting and how it's sped up and how many more official visits we're going to have here in June is also a thing that didn't exist 2-3 years ago. At the level it is now. Wasn't that you weren't doing summer visits, but the number of how many that you're doing now is much different every weekend here through June. It's going to be locked and loaded on official visits, and what those schedules look like. I think we're much further along and on the same page, and feel like we got a good grasp of the guys that we're really attacking, and feel we have strong relationships with, who also feel good about us.
There's Kalen DeBoer, great visit there. Really just so comfortable in his own skin. And by the way, man, I still continue. I told people this for a long time. I obviously have a good relationship with him, but I wish people could hear our conversation off the air too, because he's asking about my kids. He's asking, hey, what are your plans for the summer? What do you got going on? Stuff like that, like really taking an interest in people. I think, especially based on the last conversation right there, the last question right there, talking a little recruiting, I think that plays. Look, don't get me wrong. I know NIL is still matters, and that's the biggest key for a lot of these kids, and I understand that. I totally support that, but I do think his ability to connect with players will be impactful for the better in the future, and that's different than Coach Saban in a little ways. Like, hey, Coach Saban's all business, and that's great. And it worked for a very long time because the guys that were coming here, they came because it was going to be hey, this is a business decision. It's not going to be as fun as some other places, but guess what? We're going to win. I'm going to go get drafted high. I think that works, and that's wonderful. But I don't know if that's always going to be the norm all the time. So I'm really, really interested in this season. He feels comfortable. He looks more comfortable, and I think he's going to have this team very prepared to hopefully do some really nice things this year. I think there's a lot of reason to believe. All right, when we come back, we're going to go through the SEC, and we're going to go through some of the teams that I might feel best about. We haven't done this yet. I actually want to get Damien and Saber in too, And I kind of want them to pepper me with questions. It's going to be a little bit of a pop quiz. We know the Alabamas and the Auburns of the world. Maybe we can dive into them a little more. But I happen to think we could have one of the more interesting SEC races in the history of the league. You're going to think I'm crazy when I say that, but I'll help you understand why next on McElroy and Cubelic in the Morning on Jock 94.5. McElroy and Cubelic in the Morning, Jocks 94.5, May 30th, 8:39 a.m. here in Birmingham, Alabama. You're going to like this practice, I think, because I went kind of deep in the weeds last night. I wish I wouldn't have done this, but the Stars were down 3-0. I didn't care. But I enjoyed doing this research. It took some time, but I was actually quite happy with the results because it led me to feel more confident in the conclusion that I've come to here in the preseason. Before we get to that, I'm going to tell you my friends at Polar Bear Services have always appreciated the experience I've gotten when I've visited with Wes and the guys. They come to the house, take great care of me, do so many things around the house. The installation of a whole home generator is an amazing, amazing plus for your home, especially when things are going on the blink. I've absolutely loved the work I've gotten from them with the plumbing. They've come out and actually helped me with my shower recently that was leaking. They took great care of that. It's perfect now, and I couldn't be happier with the result. But the HVAC system is their bread and butter. They've been doing it for a long, long time and have helped me for years in my home, making sure that my HVAC system was ready to roll in the event in which it got too hot and started to break down. They get it taken care of, and they do so really, really quickly, and they do it in a first-class way. So call Weston and the guys. Remember, if you have a problem with their electrical, plumbing, heater, air, just pick up the phone and call the Bears, 205-497-BEAR. That's 497-BEAR. All right, I went through this practice, and I am of the belief that this is the most wide open the SEC has been in a very, very long time. And in order to, and I'm talking in the preseason, I'm not talking about once things have kicked and there's injuries and all this other stuff. I'm talking about in the preseason right now, it's extremely difficult to figure out which team you're going to like the most heading into the year. And I think Vegas reflects that. And I don't use Vegas for breakdowns very often, but I think it supports this notion. Do you realize that right now, here in the SEC, there are 3 teams with over-under win totals of 9.5. That is the absolute highest in the SEC. That's the highest. No 10.5, no 11, no 11.5. There are 3 teams, Alabama, Georgia, and Texas, that all have a over-under preseason win total of 9.5. Others include LSU at 8.5, Ole Miss at 8.5, Tennessee 8.5, Auburn 7.5, what have you. So you have a bunch of teams right now that are between 7.5 and 9.5, but nobody's over 10. That's a pretty stark contrast, by the way, from what we've seen in the past. And it further proves that this is as wide open as it's ever been. And it's a little uncomfortable, if I'm going to be honest with you, because I don't know who the heck to pick. Like, I have a lean right now, but I don't feel real strong. I'm not convicted in my lean right now. I look at the rest of the SEC, and let's go back to last year. Last year, Georgia and Texas, both 10.5 win totals. 10.5. Funny thing is, Georgia went under on theirs. Texas went over on theirs, depending on what sports book you used. But either way, 10.5. So 9.5, of course, this year, down. Let's go back the year before that to 2023. Alabama, preseason win total of 10.5. Georgia, 11.5. So very clear favorites, right? Pretty obvious. Let's go back to 2022. Was curious where that thing was. Alabama, 10.5 or 11, depending on which book you used. Georgia, 10.5 or 11. Okay, let's go back to 2021. All right, 11 for Alabama, 10.5 for Georgia. There were very, very clear and obvious favorites in each of the last handful of years. I did this for every single year, dating all the way back, trying to find the anomaly year. Where was the last time the SEC in the preseason was this wide open? And you know how far I had to go back? I'll be curious. Xavier, would you like to answer this question? How far did we go back?
Last century.
No, but close.
Okay.
Might as well have been. Damian Mitchell, would you like to take a guess as to what year we had to go back to?
2011.
No. Anyone else?
03.
Nope.
1999.
No. 2007.
Whew.
Oh, boy.
Which was considered the, quote, year of the upset. And arguably the most chaotic football season in the history of college football. Do you recall how often the number 2 team in the country lost that year, that'd be 7 times. 7 times the second-ranked team in college football lost. 7 different weeks. It's absolutely insane. The over-under win total that year had Florida at 10 and LSU at 10. So it wasn't even in the preseason. Obviously, LSU went on to win the national championship that year. Florida actually stumbled. They went 9-4. But Tim Tebow won his Heisman Trophy. So a lot of positives those years. But as far as the team accomplishments, not so much. LSU went on to win the national championship. But remember, they lost in 2 triple overtime games. 1 to Arkansas, 1 to Kentucky. But they still went on to win the BCS. And knock off who'd they beat? Ohio State in, I believe it was the Sugar Bowl. But either way, beside the point. Here's what I'm getting at. If that was the most wide open year in college football, and by far the most wide open year in the SEC in the last 2 decades, and the expectations that year in the preseason were even higher than that of what we have coming into this season, is that not a little bit of a precursor for chaos? And it's also a reflection of where we're at right now in college football. You can't stockpile talent. The depth is inadequate at most places. Even with the best teams, you have an injury or 2, you get really young in a hurry, and it becomes a real problem and a real challenge. But it's kind of insane when you think about what the expectation level looks like for this upcoming season. Just so we are clear, Alabama, Georgia, and Texas, 9.5 wins. That's the expectation for each of those 3 programs. Those are the 3 favorites. That is a half game shy of what the most chaotic season in the history of college football was, and in particular in the SEC. Half game shy of what the preseason expectations were there. I'm telling you guys, this thing has a chance to be the most wide open year in SEC football history. Now, is that a little bit short-sighted? Perhaps. I'm not referencing 1967. I'm 37 years old. Damien's 16. And Saber's 40. So, yeah, maybe from our vantage point, I'm sure there's someone listening right now that is 74 that is sitting there thinking like, well, I remember that one year, and I understand that, and I'm not trying to disregard that year, but I'm just suggesting that in the modern era, when the SEC has been the grand poobah of college football, it's never been this wide open. And I got to be honest with you, I am looking forward to it. Because I don't know if chalk flies or if chalk doesn't fly. But right now, guys, answer me this. Saber, you'll start with you. And Damien, we'll get to you in just a moment. How many teams realistically do you think this year could win the SEC?
Eight.
8?
Yeah.
So you think half the league could win it?
I could see them winning it, yeah.
See, I think that's a pretty fair answer. Damien?
Realistically, I'd say 6.
I think this feels like a poll question. I think we do a poll question. We do less than 4, 5, 6, 7, 5, 6, 7 plus. What do you think? Because I'm telling you, I know from a vantage point, it'd be easy for everyone to say, oh, well, Alabama, Georgia, Texas. All right, any one of those 3, figure it out. Some people might even go as far as say Georgia, Texas. But I think that a lot of their expectations surrounding Georgia and Texas hinge on the fact that Arch Maning's the quarterback. And I think Arch Maning's going to be really good. I really fully believe that. What if he's not? How often have we hyped a guy that played limited action and he wasn't necessarily as good as we thought once he became the guy? Now, I think it's unlikely. I think Arch's going to be great. I'm saying it could happen where there's some growing pains in his first year as a starting quarterback. That could happen. I don't think it's likely, but I think it could happen. It's certainly possible. I think it's a poll question. So check out Mac and Cube Twitter feed. We're going to continue on with this conversation too, because I think it's going to be the most wide open. I want to get your take on it too. You can text the show 205-834-9450. Does this feel like the most wide open college football season in the SEC in recent history? We'll answer it next on Mac and Cube in the Morning, Jock 94.5. All right, welcome back. Mac and Cube heading into hour number 3 here momentarily. We'll hear from Kirby Smart. We'll hear from Greg Sankey. Some interesting comments that have been made by both over the last couple days. Kirby Smart's in particular very interesting as it relates to the transfer portal, but we continue to revisit this topic, and I really want to get your reaction to it if I can. 205-834-9450, text the show, call the show, what have you. But I'm really interested. Does this feel like the most wide open SEC football season of all time? And I'm not talking about, like I said, I'm not talking about the pre-BCS era. Because I'm sure back in that time frame, there were years that I'm that are evaporating from my mind that would lead you to believe that no, there were way more wide open years. But I'm talking since there's been a national dominance out of the Southeastern Conference, has there been a year in which there was absolutely no clear frontrunner? I don't think there's been one. And part of the clear frontrunner mentality actually reflects more on, well, there's question marks abound at this school, that school, the other school. This school was good last year. They have a lot of guys back. The transfer portal's led to not sustaining excellence year over year. You can go from penthouse to outhouse and outhouse to penthouse very quickly. See what happened with Washington last year, from the national championship runner-up to where they fell, the Michigan last year to where they fell, and then from Indiana from where they were to where they went. So it's much easier to do nowadays, but it's kind of mind-blowing to think that the Southeastern Conference, forever dominated by one or two schools, and depending on the year, you could probably pick out who those one or two schools were. It's no longer the case. We'll continue with this discussion, and then we'll kind of go through the teams and tell you maybe a couple dark horses we should be thinking about when looking at possible SEC champions. We'll do it next on Mac and Cube. Welcome back, McElroy and Cubelic, Jocks 94.5. Cole's out today. I think he's traveling. I don't know for sure, but wherever he's going, hope he gets there safely. We look forward to having him back on Monday. Appreciate very much for everyone that's already contributed to the show. First hour theme kind of surrounding fandom and why we do it. Kind of jumped off at the point that last night I watched my Dallas Stars absolutely lay an egg, completely wet the bed. Whatever phrase you want to use for just being terrible, you can use it. Several of which, had I not been watching with my 6-year-old son, I would have been a little bit more emphatic in my description there. But it was bad ball. We'll just say it that way. And I just got to wonder, and I'm sitting there watching this. It's like I invest so much time and energy and effort and emotional, just an emotional tie-in to these teams that I grew up with. And we said the reasons why we support the teams we support. And the disappointment, it just outnumbers the elation so much. It's got to be 15 or 20 to 1. Disappointments, 20 disappointments for every one elation when it comes to some of these pro sports that I follow. And I just wonder why we do it. Like, it's the best. And I'll do it again next year. And I'll do it throughout the fall when the Dodgers are in the postseason if they lose to the Nationals. I know they're not going to do that this year, but I'm just like, I remember when they lost to the Nationals and it was gut-wrenching. Or the Phillies, or the Padres, or the Giants. If we lose to the wild card team again and we get down 2-0, like the disappointment, yes, I experienced the elation as a fan last year watching the Dodgers win the first championship of my lifetime. You can't count COVID. I don't count COVID. You shouldn't either, as it pertains to to professional baseball. They played 60 games. It doesn't count. Okay? But yes, it was kind of worth it. That one night in the fall last year. But I've had 100 nights of disappointment. But it's so worth it. And I just think it's a fascinating thing when evaluating our behavior as human beings. Imagine telling an alien from another planet, I used this description earlier, and I credit Josh Pate for it, because he always uses this description. You take someone from another planet and you explain to them, hey, this thing's going to disappoint you so many times, but you're still going to love it with a fanatical level of love, because there is a possibility that at some point in the future you might find happiness because of this one thing. Like, you can't make sense of it, but it's so worth it. And I'm still operating under the 24-hour rule. I'm allowed to be disappointed for at least another 12 hours. Maybe 13 hours. I'm about 11 hours or so into my disappointment right now. So, we'll see. Anyways, we then moved on to a conversation in hour number 2, and you can, of course, download the podcast wherever you want to go. We had a great discussion, replayed an interview from Kalen DeBoer that I had a couple weeks ago. It's been really, really interesting. I've listened to it a couple times now, man. I just really, really bullish on where Alabama's heading this upcoming year. Now, will this be the breakthrough year? I don't know. I can't speak to that. I'll get to that in just a moment. But it does feel like things are kind of starting to align. It does feel like things are kind of heading in the right direction. I'm starting to get real optimistic about where things could be this year, and his comfort level, and his confidence in his own team, and learning more about his own team, and learning how to put people in place to do special things this upcoming year. So I'm encouraged by that, and we got to listen to that conversation. Then we took that and said, all right, so what is the expectation level for Alabama? And we actually went through the entire SEC. And last night, during my
free time during the game?
Yeah, and there was a lot of free time. Other than me trying to figure out, texting some of my hockey buddies that were close, that are close to the Stars organization, trying to figure out why the heck we pulled our goalie after he gave up 2 goals on 2 shots. Beside the point. But in my free time in the intermissions and just kind of consoling myself and my son, more so myself, he was pretty good about it. He was disappointed but didn't care that much. He will in time. He's still living off the Dodger win from last year, so he doesn't understand disappointment. But yes, in my free time last night, I went down the rabbit hole. And I decided to figure out, all right, so I'm pretty optimistic. We're going to play this DeBoer interview tomorrow. I'm pretty optimistic about the Tide. Vegas is too. But there's 3 teams at the top of the SEC with the expectations of winning 9.5 games. According to Vegas, right? And Vegas isn't always right. They play on consumer behavior and expectations. But it made me wonder. I was like, golly, 9.5. That's the highest number in the SEC this year. And 3 teams have it. Alabama, Georgia, and Texas. Those are the 3 teams that have the highest win totals. And I got to thinking, gosh, I don't remember a year. I've been doing this for 12 years. This will be my 12th season coming up. And I don't remember a year in which there was only 9.5 wins at the top of the SEC. I'd probably be more likely to find 10.5 or 11 wins on a given year for the favorites. So I started to go back year by year. 2024, no. 2023, no. 2022, no. 2021, no. And then I went back to some of the years where there was because Alabama was so dominant for so long, the expectation level was so high. So I looked back at the years which they were replacing a quarterback or some key contributors. Looked at 2016, no. Looked at 2015, no. Looked at 2014, no. Then I was like, all right, well, maybe before we were good. I'll go back and look at that. 2008, no. 2007, finally. I found a year in which the teams weren't at 10.5 or better on the preseason expectations. And it was 2007. There were 2 teams. Florida, who was coming off a national championship, their over-under win total was 10. And then LSU that year, their over-under win total was 10. Then I went back a little bit further. 6, no. 5, no. 4, no. I went back all the way. I looked back at 4, was Auburn's year, but the expectation level that year for a few teams was high. LSU was high. They were coming off a national championship. So I went back through it, and I was like, there's never been a year in the modern era, and I consider the modern era 1998 and beyond. That's the BCS era and beyond. There has not been a year in the modern era that is as wide open in the preseason than this season is. And then it led me down another rabbit hole. I'm starting to look at odds and who has a chance to win the SEC and all this stuff. And the preseason expectations are reflected on the win totals and the odds. There's been at least 1, 2, or at most 3 favorites every year for the last 25 years. And there's been surprises. I mean, there's been some teams that have really shaken things up and have been interesting. But more often than not in the preseason, you could kind of boil down who is going to win the SEC to 3 or 4 teams at most in a given year. Granted, divisions made it a little different. The size of the league made it a little different. There was a 12-team league for a long time. Then it became 14. Now it's 16. So I think there's other factors in play. But it led me down the rabbit hole to this year, and I came up. I really believe this. And you're going to say I'm absolutely insane, but I genuinely believe this. I think there's 8 teams that can win the SEC this year. And I'm not saying that to give people false hope. I'm saying that because I genuinely believe it. Let's go through it. You want to go through it? Obviously, I think Georgia, Texas can win it, right? That shouldn't require a whole lot of explanation. Obviously, I think Alabama can win it. A lot of that will hinge on the quarterback position. Quarterback plays well, I think they have a real chance. Quarterback doesn't play well, it'll be more of a struggle. But given the question marks at Georgia and Texas, the other 2 favorites, both have new quarterbacks. It's not like there's that obvious, oh yeah, they got that guy back. Oh, well, Arch was amazing last year. Let's see how he does in year number 2 and how he progresses. Like, they don't have that. So, I mean, there's question marks at those 2 schools as well. Then you go a little bit further. Do I think LSU can win it? Absolutely. I look at LSU's returnees on offense, some of the new additions by way of the portal. I look at their defense's improvement and likely improvement from year 1 to year 2 under Blake Baker. I think they can absolutely win it this year. 100% I believe they can. I look at Auburn. You're going to think I'm crazy, but I think Auburn could win the SEC this year. Like, I think that is absolutely possible. Now, is it going to require the stars aligning? Sure. But I can tell you this. I think Auburn's chances of winning the SEC in the preseason are better today than they were in 2013. Like, we've seen crazier things happen with Auburn in the past, especially in years when they have Alabama and Georgia at home. Like, I think they absolutely can. That gives me 5 right there. I'll give you a few more. Like, what if Lenora Sellers becomes the second version of Cam Newton this year? What if he takes that kind of step? Now, do I think it's likely? Probably not. Like, Cam Newton, to me, was a once-in-a-generation player. But you're going to tell me that Lenora Sellers doesn't potentially have it in him to just absolutely go bananas this whole season and maybe bring home the Heisman Trophy en route to a possible SEC championship run? I mean, it's possible. I don't think it's necessarily likely, but I think it's possible. What about Tennessee? What if Tennessee and Joey Aguilar has some type of resurgence like Joe Burrow? Hey, he just wasn't in the right system, and now he's in the right system, and it's very quarterback friendly, and he's all of a sudden great. He's played a ton of football. He started college football games for 4 years. Maybe they have a couple breakout stars at wide receiver. Maybe the offensive line, the young players step right in. They're amazing day one. Is it possible? Sure, it's possible. Like I said, I don't think it's necessarily likely, but I think it's possible. And then finally, Texas A&M. You're going to say, oh, come on now. Come on. They're always 8-4, Greg. They're always 8-4. Well, I actually think that's they are one of the few teams, by the way, returning a quarterback this year. There's not many that are. They are. Okay? Marcel Reed is back. Mike Elko's second year. You can expect a possible second-year bump. We've seen it happen before. Defensively, yes, they lose a couple key pieces along the defensive line, but they've also added a few, and there's a few guys that a lot of people around the program are super bullish on. I think they have a really good, assuming Le'Veon Moss returns to full strength at running back, they have a really deep and high-quality running back room. I like some of the additions they made in the portal at wide receiver. I think you can make a case they have arguably, at least in the mix, for one of the top offensive lines in the league. And their schedule is honestly kind of gettable. I think it's possible. That's 8, guys. 8. There's no way on planet Earth I could have convinced you that 8 teams had a chance last year. But guess what? The team that I thought might have been the most talented on paper was Ole Miss. And they finished 7th in the league. As crazy as that may sound, they finished 7th. So it's really not that out of the realm of possibility. If the most talented team on paper can't finish in the top 6 last year because they had 3 crazy defeats, one at the hands of a 4-8 Kentucky team at home, and then just a couple weeks later, they beat the SEC champion on the same field? You tell me it's not possible? Anything's possible in today's day and age. It's just a crazy, crazy year. We put a poll question up. And I'm hoping, Damien, we have the answers to that, or Bear.
Yeah, early on right now, the poll question, how many teams do you think have a chance to win the SEC this fall? 4 or less is leading it with 66% of the vote. 5 and 6 are tied at 15.7, and 7 or more is at 2%.
Wow.
Yeah. And I actually had a question. So like the 6, I said 6. I have Texas, Georgia, LSU, Bama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina. Those are like the 6 I could realistically have a conversation. I'm still on the fence with the A&M, Auburn, and I even have Oklahoma in there as well. Because
I like the Oklahoma pick. I think that's a good dark horse.
Right, and that's the biggest thing, too, is with John Mateer, yes, we saw all the success he had at Washington State, Jaden Ott transferring from Cal to Oklahoma. I think my biggest question is, what if it doesn't necessarily work out? And, like, I think John Mateer, the more I watch him, the more I'm like, man, he's got some juice on him. But I think a lot of it is just kind of their schedule as well. And like to your point about Tennessee, I have so many question marks on Tennessee because it's unproven or like they haven't had the reps necessarily. Because I mean, I love Josh Heupel, I love the offense, but do you think he's kind of in that same boat with Ole Miss last year where you kind of had the best defense you're probably going to have and you still didn't necessarily get the ultimate goal? So is that still going to be a question mark? Is Tennessee good enough? Are they going to be good enough offensively to kind of go back to what they did in 2022 of just let's just outscore these teams instead of okay, can we find a break defensively?
I think that's fair. I'm of the teams that I listed that I think could do it. Tennessee would be near the bottom for me this year. Just a lot of turnover from last year, and that's okay. Sometimes that can be good, but they were pretty dang good last year. Like, so to expect, I think they're going to be okay on defense. I like their personnel, assuming their secondary and their corners in particular can get healthy. Like if Jermall McCoy's back to being who he was, at corner, I think they have a real chance. But I think defensively, they're going to have to be a lot more complementary. They also lose Dylan Sampson, who I thought was amazing last year. I think he deserves some Heisman Trophy recognition. I'm not sure he should have necessarily won it, but I think he should have been on the ballot. I think he should have been in New York. I think he was that good for them last year. So looking at kind of the rest of the league, like Tennessee would be near the bottom. Auburn, frankly, this year I would have them kind of near the bottom of the teams that I think could actually do it, but still pretty good. Pretty good spot to be in. A&M, I think, has a chance to be a real sleeper. I don't think anyone's talking about them, and I didn't even reference Ole Miss, really. I just look at their schedule. I think at Georgia, at Florida, they got Florida at home, but Georgia, Florida, at South Carolina. I think they were South Carolina's at home this year too. Like their schedule sets up okay. You know what I mean? Where some of their tougher games are going to be at home. They have a couple tricky road games for sure, but I do think that it's going to be one of those fascinating seasons, and it would not surprise me if we get to November 1st and there's still 8 or 9 teams that are alive in the SEC race. Because even the top teams have question marks. I mean, that's part of the evaluation. It's not so much the depth of the league, is that the class of the league, the Alabama, Georgia, and Texases of the world, all come into the season with significant questions, and especially at the most important position. I love Arch Manning. I think Arch Manning's got a chance to be a great player. But until he goes out there and does it against Ohio State, I'm going to have questions because I saw what he did last year when he had to go in the game against Georgia. It did not go well for him. Yeah, it went great against ULM. It went great against UT San Antonio, and it went great against Mississippi State, who was the 126th ranked defense in the country. It was great in those 3 games. But I need to see it against the top-tier competition. And I think I will. I really believe that. He's one of my top 15 quarterbacks in the country coming into the season. Hasn't even started more than 2 games. Pretty good spot to start. But there are questions there. Georgia, what if Gunnar Stockton isn't that guy? What if they can't adequately replace some of the pieces they lost on the offensive line? What if their defensive line isn't quite as good and they continue to kind of struggle a little bit against some versions of the run game? That's a problem. Alabama, what if Ty Simpson doesn't play really well in the top games? What if the pass rush doesn't come to fruition and they can't get home and they can't attack the opposing quarterback and apply that pressure single-handedly up front? Those are questions. What if they can't adequately replace Tyler Booker? I think they will. I think they're going to be good. These are questions. So I think part of it is at the top, the upper tier teams have all come back just a little bit. And the middle tier teams have all kind of gone up just a little bit, which creates a real mosh pit, if you will, of quality and capability. It's going to be fascinating, man. I'm surprised that there's so few of you that believe more than 5, 6, or 7 teams could actually win it. I'm actually surprised by that. Granted, I understand that the perspective, and it's pretty clear that a lot of people that are listening to this program trust Georgia, trust Texas, trust Bama, trust LSU, and they might not trust the A&Ms of the world. I get that. But did you trust South Carolina last year? I mean, because last time I checked, South Carolina was pretty close to beating Bama in Tuscaloosa. South Carolina was also pretty close to beating LSU. They win those 2 games, they're in the SEC championship game. And I know, look, close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, but better to be close than blown out. They got blown out once last year, and that was against Ole Miss. But for the most part, it's a pretty good football team. So they weren't that far off last year. Maybe they won't be this year. It'll be fascinating. It'll be really, really interesting. All right, when we come back, we're going to listen to Kirby Smart. And he had some really interesting comments on the transfer portal. We will take a listen to them next on Mac Cube in the Morning, Jackson 4-5. Welcome back, 9:24 a.m. here, Birmingham, Alabama. I'm actually in Alexander City right now, but here in Central Time Zone. Appreciate everybody being with us here on a Friday. A lot to look forward to this weekend, including the start of the College World Series. Things will kick off today for the Crimson Tide. They're in the Hattiesburg Regional. Disappointing that they weren't able to host, but they will head to Hattiesburg, and they will kick things off with a game against Miami. That'll get started today, 2 o'clock Central Time on ESPN2. Hopefully they can get through Hattiesburg this weekend, survive, and they will await the winner of the Nashville Regional. For Auburn, they will be hosting and will take on Central Connecticut State tonight, 6 o'clock there in Auburn. So it'll be a very interesting weekend to keep up with. Kind of amazing just how dominant the SEC really is. Auburn's hosting, Arkansas hosting, Tennessee hosting. LSU hosting, Georgia hosting, Ole Miss hosting, I mean, Texas hosting, and Vanderbilt hosting. I mean, you know how ridiculous that is? Just absolutely ridiculous. So here's hoping that the SEC is in great shape and we revisit what goes down this weekend with the Super Regionals coming up next week. Some interesting comments coming out of the SEC spring meetings this week. And look, Kirby Smart's been very vocal about many things. And I've been very appreciative about his transparency as it relates to the portal and how it can change to better suit both player and coach. Here's Kirby Smart on the current status of the transfer portal.
The biggest decision that has to be made in college football right now is when is the portal window and is there one or two? We had a meeting in which we unanimously decided that there really needed to be one portal window. Whatever that is what it is. And it needs to happen sometime in January. There is an outcry. There is schools. There's different conferences that feel like it should not fall during the play-in season. I would love that. I would love to be able to play the season without it. Is basketball able to do that, or do they deal with the portal during their championship?
During the tournament.
During the tournament.
Yeah.
What do we deal with during the final, let's call it maybe 4 teams? I don't know if I'm exactly right on that, but roughly we're down to 4. We deal with that. Okay, that's because of the academic calendar for us, where the academic calendar falls. And everybody doesn't have that incongruency. But when I brought that up as a complaint or a problem, it was told to me, there's no crying from the yacht. So if you're going to play in these environments, you have to be willing to do that. Now we can't do that. And then I got told, well, we have a cap year. Cap year runs July 1 to June. If the portal is in January, we can't manage our cap. We can't do our cap. Well, that's an accounting method you got to take into account. Some schools are trying to manage that and prepare for that. Why can't you just change when the cap year is? Because the settlement is going to determine the cap year. And it's going to be based on all the other sports within our sports programs, which is July 1 to the end of June. I think it's really important in football to have your team at whatever date in January. And if you ask kids when they would like to be able to go in the portal, they're going to say in January so they can go get started where? At their new place. But there's a large contingency that's growing now trying to push an April portal, maybe May. They want to practice in June, have some practices in June. I want you all to think about June for us. We have 10 days of high school camp in June. We also have official visits every weekend. So now we're going to practice our team in that same window. Something's going to suffer.
And you hear that, I mean, I think that he's on to something. And we've talked about this a bunch. About how can we make sure, because think about this. Think about being a team, and he referenced it. Look, no crime from the yacht, right? I get that. And look, it is hard to feel sympathetic for the teams that are playing deep into January, because that's where we all aspire to be. But you're potentially doing roster management in the midst of a playoff run. How is that good? You could, in theory, play a game on December 31st, and your roster might actually look different the next time you tee it up on January 9th. The big topic this past year was Penn State and their backup quarterback, a guy that played quite a bit. He had to enter the portal and was unavailable for the semifinal, and had they won the national championship. Bo Prabula, he had to transfer to Missouri. And he had to go because of the academic calendar prior to when they were able to actually play that last game. That's a tough spot to be in for a coach. And look, I think the academic calendar should always be front and center of what we're considering here. Because after all, your number one job as a college student is to hopefully get your degree. Going to the NFL is great, but I want everyone that plays college sports, regardless of what sport it is, to graduate with no student debt and to hopefully get a college degree. So the academic calendar should be at the forefront of our decision-making process. But because of the timing of the academic calendar or when the window's open, you could, in theory, have guys entering the portal and not be available to play in biggest game of their life because the opportunity on the other side might actually be better for them. And I'm not sure I have the answer for it. It is a remarkably complex situation. Do you value the academic calendar? Do you value the opportunity to go chase a championship? Both of which can actually be life-changing events. Like going and securing a starting job at another place is a life-changing event potentially. The money you might receive in NIL when you actually have maximum leverage is a potentially life-changing event. But guess what? So is being a part of a national championship team. So is going to the Orange Bowl, securing victory, and then teeing it up in the Natty. Those are life-changing experiences. And to be honest with you, I don't see a scenario that can solve both. Because if all of a sudden we allow championship teams to have waivers and a guy can play but he can be in school somewhere else, is that something that would be problematic? I think a lot of our audience, not a massive portion, but I think a lot of our audience understands what the college schedule looks like. Those first couple days of the college semester are not the most pivotal as far as your core education. You get the syllabus and you figure out what the heck you have to do to stay eligible and you call it a day. Or you get the syllabus, you figure out what your teacher is, you know how to walk to class, and you're good to go. But is it really that hard for a guy to play for Penn State but be taking classes at Missouri? I'm simply asking the question. I don't know the answer. Like, is that much of a conflict of interest? Are they sharing state secrets in those first 2 weeks of Missouri's core curriculum that would provide a significant edge to Penn State? Like, is that not something we can't do? I don't know. But I feel like it's something that we could probably figure out. The other thing is I don't love the transfer portal window falling in January or December to begin with. Like, I think I agree with Kirby Smart. It should be 1, but I've always said I really wish that 1 was in May. Because the transfer portal in its early adoption was to provide an opportunity for teams to backfill their rosters in places in which they need guys, and for guys, players, to find a new home. It wasn't meant to be created to have this massive leverage opportunity multiple times a year so that you can kind of hold your school's feet to the fire. Do you realize there are guys that have actively leveraged their deals against the university prior to starting a college football playoff game? Portal opens mid-December. They're getting ready to play a playoff game on the 20th or 21st, and they went the second the portal opened to their university and said, yeah, hey, I need more money. If you want me to play in this playoff run, I need more money. Well, what the heck is the university supposed to do there? You kind of have to give them what they want, right? It's a pretty tough spot to be in, no?
You would
Is
think.
that good for the player? Is that good for the school? Is that good for the team camaraderie? Probably not. Does it matter? I don't know. Depends on who you ask. I think it's something we need to evaluate significantly. I always thought it'd make a lot of sense. It would clean things up a lot if we just did the portal on May 1st. Portal on May 1st. You have 31 days to get in. That way you will have completed the spring semester at your previous school. You will have gone through spring ball at your previous school. You figure out, hey, you know what? My role this year is not exactly what I want. So on May 1st, I'll enter the portal. I'll go to a new school. I'll have 2 months to lock down a starting spot. I'll go through fall camp. I'll get that starting spot, and I'll have a great year. And then the following spring, I can focus on my own personal development and get better. That's something I think we need to evaluate. I just don't know if that's ever going to happen. The other, I guess, byproduct of moving the transfer portal to May would be a re-emphasis for college programs to prioritize high school recruiting. Right now, guys, nobody wants to talk about how badly the high school kids are getting penalized. No one seems to care. Well, I care. As someone that at one point was a high school player trying to get recruited, I care greatly about those guys in high school. And right now, they've been put on the back burner in favor of 21 and 22-year-old kids that are on their fourth school. So as a result, they're having to go to the FCS or small D1 or G5. And they don't have those Power 5 opportunities because a lot of those Power 5 programs said, yeah, you know what, I'll take the fully physically mature 22-year-old as opposed to the 17-year-old project. And who can blame them? Because that's what I would do. But if you moved the window to May, you might be more inclined to go and recruit that high school project player and bring him up within the system. But everything centers around the current college football player. Nobody seems to care about the high school player anymore. And that's sad. Yes, they care about the 5 stars and the 4 stars. Those guys will always be highly prioritized players. But there's a lot more 3 and 2 stars out there that could become great players if they were given Power 5 opportunities right out of the gate. But they're not getting that opportunity as often as they once did. And that's really, really unfortunate. So hopefully we can figure it out. One thing I know that I have figured out is that if I need work on my flooring, I'm going to call Shannara Flooring. They've done a great job here in central Alabama for a very long time. They're the only company in the area that has 40,000 square feet of Core-Tech flooring by Shaw in stock. So before you install it at your home, you can go and see this beautiful flooring that will add value to your home or business. It's waterproof, pet-proof, kid-proof, you name it, they got it. It's ideal in kitchens, laundry rooms, bathrooms. You can put it anywhere. It really doesn't matter. It's going to add value to your home or business. 12 months financing is available too for those that have an approved credit. So if you're thinking about making some changes to your floors, call who? Call Foo. Call them at 205-518-6423, or you can go online at fooandyou.com. All right, when we come back, we'll listen to Greg Sankey. He had some interesting comments throughout the week at SEC Spring Meetings, and we'll listen to him next on Mac and Cube. Welcome back to McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Jocks 94.5, 9:41 here in Central Alabama. Getting ready to hand things over here momentarily to the three-man front. It's going to be a great weekend. Got baseball regionals coming up. Told you a second ago, Alabama will be playing the Hattiesburg Regional. They will get going tonight, 2 o'clock. Auburn's hosting tonight. That'll be at 6 o'clock local time, so make sure you tune into that. You got some Women's College World Series going on right now. That's a lot of fun. Really a good watch. Moves fast, entertaining sport. Always really enjoy the Women's College World Series. We got some NBA that's going on right now. Kind of interesting, by the way. I'm kind of enjoying this Knicks-Pacers series, even though the games are just so lopsided in some cases. It's just wild how lopsided some of the NBA games have gotten. But last night, entertaining game. Kind of hoping the Knicks can make that a series after the blowouts in both hockey series and in the Western Conference Finals. Hoping that game can hopefully get to a Game 7 here a few days from now, so we look forward to that. We've talked a little bit about playoff expansion. We talked a little bit about playoff, the way things are structured in the playoff. We talked a little moment ago about where things are with the transfer portal. Kirby Smart had some really interesting comments. I think some really well thought out comments too, and appreciate his perspective on the matter. But now let's turn it to Commissioner Greg Sankey. He's been really making the rounds this whole week at SEC spring meetings, and he's had some fascinating comments about where we're at in the sports. Let's take a listen.
We're trying to find a format to determine whatever number it is, the best teams in college football. And I think where we are right now is we have used a political process inside a room to come to decisions about football. We should be using football information to come to football decisions. Have to be unanimous. We provide a model and then we sit on our hands for a year and a half, 2 years, as opposed to looking at the depth of issues I'm describing about the game and the concerns about regular season scheduling being impacted by what we have right now. We sat on our hands because we had to have unanimity.
And you hear that, they just the challenges of getting things done right now in college athletics is so hard. I mean, is that not kind of amazing? Like he said, unanimity. When is anything ever unanimous ever? Like it's seldom ever unanimous. Like everyone's got different opinions. Everyone's got different thoughts. Imagine having to find unanimity to make any changes. And look, they were able to change the seating format. We're all excited about that. I think it makes perfect sense. With all due respect to Boise State, they had no business getting a first-round bye last year. Now, that was partly due to what went down in the ACC, and it was entirely due to the fact that the Pac-12 collapsed. Pac-12 doesn't collapse, guess what? You have 5 conference champions from the Power 5. You have 1 G5 champion. So therefore, Boise, in order to get a first-round bye, they would have to have leaped 2 conference champions. That was unlikely. They could leap 1, right? But to leap 2, kind of unlikely, right, from the Power 5? Assuming the Pac-12 remained completely intact. So it made sense in theory with what we were dealing with at that time. But things needed to change. They were able to do that. We now have straight seating, and had that model been in place last year, then Penn State and Texas would have received the first round bye. Now, here's what's beneficial now about straight seating, is that games between 5 and 12, 6 and 11, 7 and 10, and 6 and 8 and 9, those games are hopefully going to be a little more competitive. Because last year, let's be real, they weren't competitive. They weren't. As much as I wanted them to be, as much as I love the sport, I think there was one competitive game, and that was Clemson and Texas, and I don't even think that was super competitive. So those games are now going to be more competitive, which is encouraging. And we are not going to see teams that were seeded 5, 6, 7 have an easier path than the teams ranked first and second. Last year, guys, Penn State, their path to the semifinal It's not their fault. They were just the beneficiary of where they ended up being seated. Their path to the semifinal required victories over SMU at home, in which they were a heavy favorite, and then they had to beat Boise State. Meanwhile, Oregon, their path to the semifinal as the number 1 team in the country, required them beating Ohio State. What would you have rather played? Would you have rather played against SMU and Boise? Would you have rather having played Ohio State? Obviously, hindsight being 2020, playing SMU and Boise was a little more manageable path. So straight seeding now I think is going to be beneficial this upcoming year. But the other thing that we got to talk about is what are we going to do with these automatic qualifiers? The Big Ten is dug in on a 4-4-2-2-1 model. 4-4-2-1-1, 4-4-2-2-1-1, 4-4-2-2-1. That's the third time's a charm. 4-4-2-2-1. 4 automatic qualifiers for the SEC, 4 for the Big Ten, 2 for the ACC, 2 for the Big 12, 1 for the G5. The Big Ten wants that. Why? Because they want the SEC to adopt the 9-game conference schedule. If the SEC adopts the 9-game conference schedule, then the 4-4-2-2-1 model makes the most sense. That way the SEC is guaranteed at least 4 teams in the college football playoff every year. But if the SEC maintains their 8-game conference schedule, then the SEC is absolutely going to push for the 5+11 model. 5 conference champions that all make the field and 11 at-larges. Why do they want the 11 at-larges if they keep the 8-game conference schedule? Because they're more than likely going to have better win-loss record if they play more non-conference teams. Why? Because the SEC has fared extremely well over the course of time in those non-conference games, several of which are against lower-level competition. So this will be a really interesting thing to follow here. Because if the SEC gets their way, and we might find out here at some point very soon, I don't really know what the SEC wants, by the way. I think half the SEC wants 8 games, half the SEC wants 9 games on their conference schedule. But the 8 or 9 game conversation will 100% determine what the future college football playoff format's going to be. They are completely married and in lockstep. So let's watch closely and see what happens there. I really badly want a 9-game conference schedule and the 5+11 model. There is no chance I get my way. I wish I did, but it's not going to happen. I'd be highly surprised if it did. So let's just see. It's going to be fascinating, man, because with that 9-game conference schedule comes the 4 automatic qualifiers for the SEC, which means there could be as many as 2 additional play-in games on conference championship weekend, meaning 3 plays 6, 4 plays 5. Winners of those 2 games earn a berth in the college football playoff. So you then have expanded inventory there. A lot of balls in the air right now for Greg Sankey, and I couldn't pick a better person to be leading the charge. I think he is supremely qualified, has a great feel for where the sport is, and has a great feel for where the sport needs to go. I really trust him, and I think things are going to all work out for us as college football fans here very, very soon. All right, when we come back, we'll give you our TD's Fine Furniture Super Sofa Game of the Weekend next on Mac and Cube in the Morning. Final segment of the show here, McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Getting ready to pass it over to our good friends at the three-man front. Before we do that, I'll tell you about my friends at Bromberg's. It's the very best. I've never had a better experience than when I shop at Bromberg's. It's the only place I've shopped for jewelry since we've moved back to Birmingham. I love all the sales staff, have great friends there. They've taken great care of me. They've helped me get educated on all the different purchases, knowing that these purchases could, in some cases, be in our family for many generations. That's the hope, and that's the only reason why. That's the only place I would shop as a result, because they're going to protect your purchase with beautiful, timeless jewelry, natural diamonds, gold, silver, platinum, you name it, they got it. So go and check out Bromberg's in Mountain Brook Village and at the Summit. Say, Bear, it's time for our TD's Fine Furniture Super Sofa Game of the Weekend.
It absolutely is, and you can find your super sofa or furniture for the entire home at TD's Fine Furniture, now with a new closeout center that's open. Manufacturer's discount. Items are marked down 50% or more, plus everyday great deals throughout the store at TD's Fine Furniture in Summerton. For me, even though the game series should have ended last night, I'm going to take Game 6, Knicks Pacers, Saturday night, 7 o'clock TNT. I think the Pacers get it done, so I want to make sure I'm going to watch that game.
That's a good one for sure. I will go to the Hattiesburg Regional. Alabama, kind of wished we were hoping. I wish this was in Tuscaloosa, but it is what it is. You got to play the games that you got. Miami and Alabama, 2 o'clock today on ESPN2. Damian?
Birmingham Stallions, baby. We're taking a trip up to Memphis for the Showboats, a tune-up game before the playoffs, 2 p.m. on Fox. That's my TD's Fine Furniture Super Sofa game of the weekend.
Great show today. Really appreciate everyone getting involved, texting into the hotline, all that fun stuff. We look forward very much to recapping what goes on in the College World Series quest this weekend. We'll revisit that on Monday, and we'll continue to kind of settle things down from SEC spring meetings when Cole returns. So we appreciate very much all of you that have chimed in. Download the podcast wherever you get the podcast. Really appreciate it. Like, rate, subscribe, all that fun stuff. You can check out all 3 hours of the show there. Our three-man front friends are next.